The sun had barely risen, casting its golden light over a quiet suburban street. Cars rolled past, their drivers lost in their morning routines, coffee cups in hand, and radios humming softly with the day's news. It seemed like just another ordinary day, until it wasn't. Lieutenant Colonel Maya Thompson, a distinguished Army officer with over 2 decades of service, had just finished her morning run. Her calm demeanor and strong presence reflected her years of leadership and dedication to her country. With her military jacket draped over one arm and her keys jingling in hand, she headed toward her car, parked just a few feet away. Little did she know that an interaction moments away would test not just her composure, but her very safety. Officer Daniel Watts, a young and ambitious patrol cop, was cruising through the area in his squad car. Daniel, though relatively new to the force, carried an air of authority that often bordered on overconfidence. His eyes scanned the street, his mind racing through the stories he'd heard of suspicious activity in this neighborhood. Today, he was determined to catch anything out of place. It was then that their paths crossed. Daniel noticed Maya by her car, and for reasons only he could explain, his attention locked on her. Maybe it was the way she moved, or maybe it was the sight of the military jacket in her hand. Perhaps it was something far deeper and more troubling. A bias buried within him that he didn't even realize was there. As Daniel approached, Maya noticed the patrol car slowing down beside her. She didn't think much of it at first. Encounters with law enforcement were nothing new for someone with her years of experience. But then Daniel stepped out of the car, hand on his holstered weapon, and began shouting commands. The scene escalated quickly. "Step away from the vehicle. Hands where I can see them." Daniel's voice was sharp, almost panicked, as he drew his gun and pointed it at Maya. Maya froze, her heart racing. Confusion washed over her. "Officer, what's going on?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Her military training kicked in, but even that couldn't prepare her for the humiliation of being treated like a criminal on her own street. "I said step away." Daniel's voice grew louder, drawing the attention of nearby residents who peeked out of their windows. Phones began recording. Maya slowly raised her hands, the weight of her military career, her years of service, and the respect she'd earned flashing before her eyes. This wasn't just an act of misunderstanding. It was something far more insidious. And then, as if fate herself intervened, the situation took an unexpected turn. A voice crackled over Daniel's radio. Another officer nearby, witnessing the scene unfold on his way to a different call, pulled up. "Watts, what the hell are you doing?" The officer shouted, rushing toward the tense confrontation. Daniel hesitated, his grip on the weapon faltering. Maya remained calm, her eyes locked on Daniel as she tried to process what had just happened. The damage had already been done, and the ripples of this moment were about to shake the entire department. What happens next would spark a wave of accountability, uncover hidden prejudices, and lead to a reckoning that no one could have foreseen. Stay tuned, because this story is just getting started. The neighborhood was eerily silent now, except for the faint hum of the other officer's engine, and the murmurs of neighbors who had gathered at their windows or quietly stepped onto their porches. Maya stood still, her hands raised, every fiber of her being resisting the urge to defend herself in the way she had been trained to for years. Her heart was pounding, but her face remained calm, masking the storm of emotions within her. The second officer, Sergeant Michael Harris, was older and more seasoned than Daniel. His voice carried authority, but also something that Daniel's lacked: control. Michael knew the weight of every action taken in moments like these and how quickly things could spiral. "Daniel, holster your weapon." Michael barked, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Daniel hesitated, his eyes darting between Maya and Michael. His grip on the gun loosened slightly, but his stance remained defensive, like a coiled spring ready to snap. "She was acting suspicious," Daniel stammered, trying to justify his actions. Michael stepped closer, putting himself between Daniel and Maya, his tone unwavering. "Suspicious? She's standing by her own car, Watts. Look at her. Does she look like a threat to you?" Maya didn't flinch. She watched Michael closely, analyzing every word, every movement. There was something in his tone that told her he wasn't just trying to defuse the situation. He understood what had gone wrong. Daniel finally lowered his gun, his face a mix of confusion and frustration. I thought she might be breaking in or what? Because she doesn't look like you expect someone to look in this neighborhood. Michael cut him off sharply, his words heavy with implication. Maya finally spoke, her voice steady but laced with an edge that made both officers stop. I'd like to know exactly what about me seems suspicious, Officer Watts. Her tone wasn't angry, but it carried the authority of someone who had spent years commanding respect in the face of adversity. Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but found no words. He glanced at Michael, hoping for backup, but found none. The older officer's stern gaze made it clear that there would be no excuses. The small crowd that had gathered grew bolder, stepping closer now that the immediate threat seemed to have passed. Whispers rippled through the group. Did you see that? She's in the military. Look at her jacket. That cop needs to be fired. Maya could feel the weight of their eyes on her. She was no stranger to public attention, but this felt different. More invasive, more personal. Michael turned to Maya, his tone softening. Ma'am, I deeply apologize for what just happened. I can assure you this will be addressed immediately. Maya lowered her hands slowly, but her posture remained firm. She looked directly at Michael. An apology is a start, but this goes deeper than just one moment. It always does. Michael nodded, understanding her unspoken words. I know, and I'll make sure this doesn't get swept under the rug. Before anyone could say more, a woman in the crowd stepped forward, her phone still recording. Excuse me, but we all saw what happened here. Someone needs to make this right. Maya turned to her, offering a small nod of acknowledgement. She wasn't sure who this woman was, but the support from a stranger in such a raw moment meant more than she could say. Daniel stood frozen, his mind racing. He could feel the judgmental stares of the crowd, the heat of their disapproval pressing down on him. This wasn't how he had imagined his day going. In his mind, he was just doing his job, protecting the community. But now, for the first time, he wondered if he had let his own biases cloud his judgment. Michael cleared his throat, breaking the heavy silence. Watts, head back to the station. Now. Daniel hesitated, glancing at Maya one last time before nodding stiffly and walking back to his squad car. As he drove away, the tension in the air seemed to ease, but it wasn't gone entirely. Maya looked back at Michael. What happens next? Michael sighed, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. Next, there's going to be a lot of questions, a lot of paperwork. But I'll make sure your voice is heard in all of this. That's not enough, Maya said firmly. This isn't just about me. It's about every time something like this happens and gets brushed aside. If you're serious about making sure it doesn't happen again, then it needs to be more than just an internal review. Michael met her gaze, his expression thoughtful. You're right, but change doesn't come easy. People like Watts, they think they're doing the right thing, but they don't stop to ask themselves why they're making the decisions they do. That's exactly the problem, Maya replied, and if no one holds them accountable, they'll never learn. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of another squad car pulling up. This time, it was the precinct captain, a middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense demeanor. She stepped out of her car, her sharp eyes taking the scene before her. Sergeant Harris, she said briskly. I've been briefed on the situation. Where's Watts? I sent him back to the station, Captain, Michael replied. The captain turned her attention to Maya, her expression softening slightly. Ma'am, I'm Captain Elaine Cooper. First and foremost, I want to apologize for what happened here today. We'll be conducting a full investigation, and I assure you this will be handled appropriately. Maya nodded but didn't let her guard down. I've heard promises like that before, Captain. I hope this time it's different. Captain Cooper hesitated, as if weighing her words carefully. It will be. I give you my word. But as the captain spoke, Maya couldn't help but wonder if those words would hold true. Promises had been made before, only to be forgotten as soon as the public's attention shifted. This time, she decided, she wouldn't let that happen. The crowd began to disperse slowly, but the impact of what they had witnessed lingered in the air. Neighbors exchanged quiet words, shaking their heads and sharing their disbelief. As Maya finally got into her car, she took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the steering wheel, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. As she drove away, her mind raced with thoughts of what she needed to do next. She wouldn't let this moment fade into the background like so many others had. She had spent her life fighting for her country. Now she would fight for something just as important, justice. Back at the station, Daniel sat at his desk, his head in his hands. The weight of what had just happened bore down on him, and for the first time, he started to question everything he thought he knew about himself, his role as an officer, and the community he had sworn to protect. The story wasn't just about one moment, one encounter, or even one person. It was about the bigger picture, the systemic issues that allowed moments like these to happen in the first place. And as the wheels of accountability began to turn, it became clear that this incident would set off a chain of events no one could have predicted. As the hours passed, the ripple effects of the morning's incident began to spread. Maya couldn't shake the weight of what had happened. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the barrel of that gun pointed at her, the flash of fear in Officer Watt's eyes, and the judgment in the stares of the neighbors. It wasn't the first time she had encountered prejudice, but it was the first time it had felt so immediate, so life-threatening. She spent the rest of the day pacing her living room, the muted sound of news playing in the background. Her phone buzzed constantly. Friends, colleagues, even strangers who had seen the videos that had quickly gone viral. Every text and call carried the same sentiment: outrage and support. Maya wasn't the type to let emotions cloud her judgment, but this felt different. This wasn't just about her pride or dignity. It was about something larger, something systemic. She knew she couldn't let this slide, not when so many others might not have had the same composure, the same experience, to make it out unscathed. Meanwhile, back at the police precinct, Captain Cooper convened an emergency meeting. The mood was tense, the air heavy with unspoken judgment and unease. Officers sat around the conference table, their faces a mix of worry and apprehension. At the head of the table, Captain Cooper stood with a file in her hands and an expression that silenced any whispers before they could start. This morning's incident has already drawn public attention, she began, her tone even but firm. The video is all over social media, and the community is demanding answers. We're launching an internal investigation immediately, and I expect full cooperation from everyone. All eyes shifted to Daniel, who sat near the back, his face pale and drawn. He could feel the weight of their stares, the unspoken questions hanging in the air. What were you thinking? How could you let this happen? Daniel opened his mouth, but Captain Cooper cut him off. Watts, I don't want excuses. This isn't just about you. This is about the trust our community places in us. Every action we take reflects on this department as a whole, and today we failed. The room fell silent. No one dared to speak, not even Sergeant Harris, who was usually the first to jump to someone's defense. The silence was deafening, and Daniel could feel the walls closing in around him. Outside the station, protests had already begun to gather. A small group of community members held signs, their chants echoing through the streets. Justice for Maya, they shouted, their voices rising with every repetition. The crowd grew steadily, fueled by the shared frustration of years of similar incidents. Among the protesters was Rachel, the woman who had recorded the encounter that morning. She hadn't planned to become an activist, but something about the way Maya had stood there, calm and dignified even with a gun pointed at her, had struck a chord deep within her. Rachel took the megaphone and addressed the growing crowd. This isn't just about one officer or one mistake, she said, her voice shaking slightly but growing stronger with every word. This is about a pattern, a system that allows bias to fester unchecked. We need accountability, and we need it now. Back at Maya's house, She finally sat down at her dining table, a laptop open in front of her. She had spent the last hour drafting an official statement, not just for herself, but for the countless others who had experienced similar injustices. When she hit post, her words spread like wildfire. I have served this country for 25 years, dedicating my life to protecting others. But today, I was treated like a criminal because of the way I look. This isn't just about me. It's about the system that allows this to happen. It's time for change. The post garnered thousands of reactions within minutes. Comments poured in, some offering support, others dismissing her concerns. The debate raged on, but Maya stayed focused. She wasn't interested in arguing with strangers on the internet. She was interested in real, tangible change. At the precinct, Captain Cooper met privately with Michael. She trusted him, not just because of his years of experience, but because he had shown time and time again that he was willing to stand up for what was right, even when it wasn't easy. Michael, I need you to lead this investigation, she said, her voice low but resolute. I need someone I can trust to handle this with integrity. Michael nodded. I'll do whatever it takes, Captain. But we both know this goes beyond just Watts. If we're serious about change, we have to dig deeper. Captain Cooper sighed, leaning back in her chair. I know, but change doesn't come easy, and it doesn't come fast. We have to start somewhere. As the day turned into night, the tension continued to build. Maya couldn't sleep, her mind racing with thoughts of what she could do next. She considered reaching out to local leaders, organizing a town hall, maybe even filing a formal complaint with the department. She knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but she also knew she couldn't back down. And then there was Daniel. Sitting alone in his small apartment, he replayed the events of the morning over and over in his mind. He couldn't escape the image of Maya standing there, calm and composed, while he had acted out of fear and instinct. For the first time, he began to question the training he had received, or the lack of it. He thought about reaching out to Maya, to apologize directly, but he wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do, or if it would only make things worse. The weight of his actions was unbearable, and he knew that no apology could undo the harm he had caused. The stage was set for a confrontation, not just between Maya and the department, but between the community and the system that had failed them. The protests continued to grow, the voices demanding justice growing louder with each passing day. And amidst it all, Maya prepared herself for the fight ahead, knowing that this was about more than just her. This was about change, accountability, and the hope that one day no one else would have to go through what she had experienced. The battle was far from over, and the tension only continued to build, each moment adding another layer to a story that was far from its conclusion.